I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On this week's episode, we will talk about the re-release, the edition 2 of the Read and Reaction Preseason magazine. We'll get you a little quick announcement on that to open with 2 bits. We'll talk about the biggest questions ahead for spring ball, our one biggest question ahead each for spring ball. Young players we'd like to see take a leap in 2023, starting in spring practice here this next week, and a few college football rule changes that are a bit questionable, in my mind at least. We'll find out what Will thinks in a dollar. Will, how's it going tonight, man?
Man, it's going awesome. I'm it's starting to get warm up here in Pennsylvania. So makes a big difference once the sun starts coming out. It starts getting later, it starts getting dark later in the night. And we're busy with a bunch of stuff behind the scenes. So got all that stuff to do at night. So it's nice to finally see the sun again. That's the bad part about living up north, man. All winter long, it's just gray.
Just in time to go. This is a great transition here into 2 bits here. Just in time to go into a cave and write a magazine for another couple months here, dude. So Read and Reaction Preseason magazine. We will be doing another edition. We will be aiming for that Memorial Day release time again. We are looking into some details about potentially printing it. Will, we don't want to make any announcements yet. We're going to figure things out on that. We're still kind of figuring things out a little bit on that front. But Will, I'll let you have the floor here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot of people reach out to us last year and suggest that they would appreciate or would enjoy a hard copy. So we're going to try to deliver that this year. Like you said, we're still working out the details on what that's going to look like. But we should be announcing relatively soon the opportunity to pre-order. I'm pretty confident we're going to have hard copies this year for people who want it, or digital copies for people who want it that way as well. So we're excited about that. To be able to give people something they can actually hold in their hands and be able to read the preseason magazine. Same thing as last year, in terms of it's going to be all Florida Gators, and you don't get that in most preseason magazines. That's really what we feel like our differentiator here is. We know this team, we love this team, and we want to cover it in a way nobody else does, and that's what this is. So we appreciate everybody who supported us last year, but we're getting the word out a little bit early this year so that people can hopefully get it in their hands, get it to the people that they love, maybe as a gift. And for the Father's Day is not too far off from that launch date on Memorial Day. So if you got a dad in your life, a son in your life, somebody like that you want to give something to right around then, that'd probably be a great thing to give them.
Yeah, we said this last year too, but this was something that was a blast to work on, because my entire life growing up, I read these magazines every summer. But Will's right. You get that couple pages on your team, and the rest of it's about the national scene, or maybe like you go and read conference by conference. There might be an SEC write-up with a little chunk about Florida, but we got a whole magazine here dedicated strictly to the Florida Gators, and it received a lot of positive feedback last year. We're looking forward to year number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think had it not been successful last year, we wouldn't be doing it again, right? That's one of the nice parts about a startup, is you sort of try one thing and see whether people like it, and then sort of move on from there if it doesn't work out that way. But like you said, we got a lot of positive feedback, but one of the big feedbacks we got was that people actually wanted something that they could put in their hands. So we're going to try to do that this year. And, beyond that, I think we've sort of streamlined what we thought worked for the magazine last year, what didn't, and then have added some stuff that we think is going to be interesting to people, and some things we've sort of stumbled across over the last year and said, that'd be a cool feature applied to Florida. And so we're looking forward to some of those new things and new features and getting feedback on that, but as well as, going back to some of the old things that we did last year. I mean, obviously last year being Billy Napier's first year, we were able to go back and compare his first year, or at least prepare people for his first year, given sort of what Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer were able to do in the past. Well, now we can do that again for year 2 for both of those guys. And, obviously we had Napier's Army come in last year, and some of them have already left, but, the key coaching changes and things like that. And then just the roster overall, how the recruiting compares, the season, what we sort of expect as the schedule runs out. Hopefully a couple of interviews with people that Gator fans are familiar with. So, a lot of different things. We obviously focus heavy, and especially myself, focus heavily on the analytics and those sorts of things. And there'll be plenty of that in there. But Nick, you're always the storyteller, and so I like infusing some of the stuff we do with that too, because college football is great from the standpoint of we have all this data, and sometimes that data helps us tell the story, but the human side of it is important too. And you really nail that, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's definitely something I'm looking forward to here diving into. We are currently working on. We have a lot of the topics that we're going to cover, and a lot of it's aspirational early on, right? We found that out last year. There was a lot of topics that we're like, that might need to get cut. That might need to get cut. So it doesn't really. It gets finalized as it goes. It's a process. It gets finalized as it goes. But we're definitely looking forward to producing that, and a lot of hard work on that last year. It was a lot of fun to do. Looking forward to doing it again. All right, let's dump.
One thing I will add is if you're interested in advertising in the magazine, certainly
Yep.
reach out to us. We've got a couple of people lined up in that capacity, but if you're a local business down there in Florida, you want to really hit that Florida audience. This is a way to do it, and something that's going to sit on a table at a dentist's office or sit in somebody's office for 5 or 6 months and still be relevant. So if you're interested, reach out to us. Will at readandreaction.com. Normally I don't like using this space to pimp our stuff, but since we're already announced in the magazine, let's go ahead and do it. And hopefully some of you out there are interested and we'll reach out.
Yep. Again, what was that email address,
Will at readandreaction.com.
All right. So that's out there. We'll have more announcements about the magazine here when we have more details, but we wanted to at least put some sort of announcement out there to let everyone know that it is coming, and you can expect it around Memorial Day again this year. All right. Biggest question here for spring ball, Will. I'm going to start with this with the linebacker group. We did a good job in the portal. We absolutely need the help in the portal. But between Mitchell, Spurlock, and Nunnery coming in here at the linebacker group, certainly some options there to go along with the guys who are returning. Really would like to see that defined core step up. You had a great point the other night. We were on Gators Breakdown with Gator Dave there. If you guys want to check out that episode from earlier this week where we broke down the entire roster. But you had a great point about Nunnery and just how freakishly athletic he can be and how he might be a potential difference maker in this lineup this year, that linebacker position.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy was like the special teams player of the year. But then, you sort of think of that guy. I think I said you think of like Steve Tasker, right? Or Matthew Slater and those sorts of guys as the special teams guys. But, this was a contribution early on when he was at Houston. And now he comes into Florida and he's like testing off the charts from a physical perspective. And so I'm excited to see what Nunnery can do. Certainly it's been a long time since Florida's had a linebacker who can go side to side like he potentially can, but obviously, he came in as a safety when he was at Houston and now is at a linebacker position. How much do the instincts take over, especially in the SEC? Houston is different than the SEC. And so we'll see how he progresses there. My biggest question actually for spring is where's the pass rush going to come from? And some of that is a little bit from a linebacker perspective, but Florida had 23 sacks last year. And that's just abysmal considering what they've done previously. I mean, Dave and I would do over-unders every year, and I would take the under, and the sacks would be set at like 36. And so to come out there and only have 23 for an entire year, that's 96th in the country. And, out of all the things that you might point to in terms of why Florida's defense struggled last year, the main thing that I would point to is that they just could not get pressure on the passer at any point. And now when they did, they also couldn't bring him down, right? So you think about, the big ones where Gervon Dexter has the penalty when he comes up the middle against LSU on Jaden Daniels. But that was really the only time Jaden Daniels got hit the entire game. They had a couple of sacks where guys came around the edge, but they didn't hit Daniels all that much. You think about Florida State with Jordan Travis just running away from him the entire game. They were in the backfield but couldn't actually finish the job. So to me, that's the question: is who's going to bring that consistent pass rush? That is mostly a defensive line question, but certainly with Austin Armstrong coming in as defensive coordinator, it becomes a linebacker question too, because he's got a pretty decent reputation for blitzing. But you're not going to be able to get away with 23 sacks in the SEC and have a successful defense, as we just saw. They need that to be up more of the 32, 33, 34 range before you're even really talking about the ability to help your secondary. And Florida secondary hasn't been good for a real long time. And so they're going to need some help even this year as well, especially at the safety position. When you sort of look at the depth that they have there, I mean, you're looking at Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell, and then a bunch of unknowns there at the safety position. So that's what I'm asking. My big question for spring ball is, can you get pressure on the quarterback? And certainly, spring is always interesting because you look at it and go, well, is it because the offensive line's bad or the defensive line is good? But last year when you watched that spring game, there was no pressure from the defense. The defense got cut through like Swiss cheese, and then we went to the season, and it turns out that was exactly what the defense was. So if you're asking me what question I want answered, I want, where's the pressure coming from?
Setting aside the recruiting class coming in this year, setting those guys aside, of all the returning players on the edge, who are you most looking forward to developing here in 2023? Like, if this guy develops, it could really change things along the defensive front.
Human Milan, he had like 9 or 9.5 tackles for loss. I think he had 4.5 sacks. And so if you get 10 sacks out of Human Milan,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden Pal Ryland, let's say Pal Ryland adds like, 5 or 6 sacks from his side, you're already halfway to your overall goal just with your defensive end and your edge rusher. And you're going to get a couple from linebackers just because of coverage sacks. You're going to get a couple from corners maybe who are coming off the edge. You'll get a couple from your safeties. So, but you need to sort of set that like the best way for any defense to succeed is if you've got guys on the outside who are making the quarterback uncomfortable. And Human Milan, especially, is a guy who I think showed it last year. And then you look behind him and you've got Tyreek Sack and you got Justice Boone, you've got behind Power Island, you've got Pyburn and then Searcy. So there's not a whole lot of depth at either one of those positions where we have a lot of experience. So like I said, Human Milan already really showed it, especially once Brenton Cox went out last year. Human Milan really stepped up and became that guy who seemed to be the guy who could bring consistent pressure. And like I said, they're just going to have to continue to finish the job when they get into the backfield. You're not going to be able to allow guys like Jordan Travis and other players like that to get out on the edge outside of that sort of stuff. But, I expect with a full year where those guys know they're starting, that they're going to come out, hit the ground running, and hopefully can deliver the sort of pass rush we're accustomed to from a Florida defense.
I thought you and Dave brought up a great point the other night when discussing the edge rushers, where last year they were asked to drop back in coverage at times, where some of those guys didn't look so natural in coverage. Do you expect Armstrong to continue that, or do you expect him to really ask those guys more to get upfield and create the pass rush?
I mean, I think he's gonna do some of it because you have to do some of it at times, right? But it seemed like there was so the simulated pressures that Patrick Toney wanted to run they're designed to do two things. They're designed to get pressure from unconventional places, right? So you like drop a defensive end and you bring a linebacker, and you're still rushing four, but the offensive line doesn't know where the four are coming from. But then it's also designed to be safe on the back end because you're dropping 8 or you're dropping 7 guys in coverage, and so you're able to be safe when you do that and play zones. The problem is that Florida wasn't very good at that, so it wasn't all that safe even when they dropped the 7 guys. And so what are you really getting out of it? And I think that's where you're going to start to see the difference is if you're already going to get if you already don't have confidence in your secondary to cover, then you have to make the quarterback get the ball out quicker. And so that's where I think having guys closer to the quarterback rushing makes a big difference. You don't want linebackers coming from 4 or 5 yards off the line of scrimmage having to come through and always make the play. Now that doesn't mean you never drop a guy like Powell Ryland into coverage, but for that to be a major staple of what you're going to do on defense, means he either needs to be really good at it or you better have linebackers who are awesome at getting home. And I don't think we saw that last year with the linebackers. And so if the linebackers aren't going to be awesome at getting home, let them be in coverage, right? Like just win up front. And that's the big thing. I think of all the things that you could say that they need development is that the front four for Florida have to get pressure without any help. And then when you do bring help, now the offensive line for the opposition is just scatterbrained because they were already like tense. Hey, I got to keep Powell Ryland from coming screaming around the edge. And now you take your first step and Powell Ryland drops into coverage and, oh crap, where's that linebacker? Right. And you got to figure out how to pass guys off and, you run a couple of stunts and those sorts of things. So I expect there to be more blitzing. I expect that when the linebackers come, they're not going to try to be safe on the back end. That was the MO of Armstrong at Southern Miss. But I think there will be times where they drop, but and I don't think the scheme's going to be that different. Armstrong even said that today that he's sort of going to change himself to what Florida's scheme has been rather than try to fit his scheme on top of the players. So I don't think things will change that much, but I do expect there to be more blitzing, more aggressiveness.
Will be interesting to see that develop here. Let's pop over for 6 bits to the offensive side of the ball. Spend a lot of time on the defense there. It is funny, Will. The offense has so many new players on it this spring, and yet we're focused on the defense for a lot of those big questions. I suppose a lot of the rosters turning over on both sides of the ball.
I don't know. We both saw that defense last year, man. So that's where the questions lie.
Yeah, there's still a lot of questions after the last few years. So young players we'd like to see take a leap here in 2023. You look at Graham Mertz coming in, and you think maybe without the running ability of Anthony Richardson, perhaps you'll work in a little more of the short passing game this year. Tight ends play a factor in that. Another thing you mentioned on Gators Breakdown the other night. Can we get a guy just to go out and settle in the soft spot in the zone about 6-7 yards downfield and just have a simple completion? That's really all. If we can get that out of tight end this year, that would be an upgrade over what we had last year. And I know a young player you have in mind out of this group here is from this tight end group. So why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, I mean, it's Arliss Borningham. I think, look, Dante Sanders is a nice story, but didn't really do a whole lot last year as a tight end. Keon Zipper has been somebody we've been waiting to have step up, and just there have been flashes, but never consistency there. Odom got injured in the bowl game, and I think we can all tell is a solid player but limited. Borningham is a guy that the staff was really excited about last year before the season started. Obviously, red shirts. We don't get to see him at all, but he's got all the physical skills that you want for a guy who's going to go out there and be a big time receiver there at tight end. Now, he has the ability to split out, right? And that was what we were talking about the other night on Gators Breakdown, that the advantage of having 12 personnel, if you've got a tight end who can block, is that now you're dictating to the defense who they bring in their defensive package. So you get them to run a traditional defense rather than a nickel, right? Where they've got slower linebackers, and then you split out your running back and you split out your tight end. And now you've got real advantages because somebody's on a linebacker in one-on-one coverage, and you can get them on like a crossing route running away from a linebacker who just can't catch them. And let's be honest, we've seen Florida's linebackers running behind offensive guys for years when they couldn't catch them because Florida hasn't really had the personnel to be able to match up with some of those highly skilled guys at running back and tight end. Borningham has that profile, and Livingston in some ways has that. Tony Livingston has that profile as well in terms of being an athlete, being a former basketball player, and potentially being able to separate and really get yards after the catch. If Sanders and Zipper and Odom are the top three, I mean, that's fine. But I think then we're looking at a lot of 11 personnel where we're going to have 3 wide receivers on the field a lot, because it's difficult for me to imagine that those 3 guys are going to dictate to the defense who comes out on the field. And you're not going to be making personnel decisions based on those 3 guys. If Borningham or Livingston or even Hayden Hansen can prove that they can be a real threat, exactly what you were just saying, go out 7 yards, turn around, catch the ball, fall down, and now it's 2nd and 2. That's a really dangerous play for a defense, because if an offense can be in 2nd and 2 like that just right away, well, all of a sudden now everything else opens up. And I do think that for all the criticism of Graham Mertz, his quick game skills are better than Anthony Richardson showed last year. And so there will be some opportunities to turn 1st and 10s into 2nd and 2s through the passing game. But you're going to have the guys step up. And so if you're looking at, I know people are excited about the wide receivers, and look, I am too. I mean, the reports from Andy Jean and Aiden Mizell thus far have been really, really positive. Eugene Wilson is a guy that you think is going to be a real scatter guy in the slot. You think about Etienne and Johnson, and then you got Trayon Webb coming in, and at that skill position, you're excited about it just because we saw what those guys could do last year. I'm worried about tight end. Like, tight end is the place where I go, we don't have anybody in the sophomore class. You got Odom in the junior class. You got Sanders and Zipper in the senior class. 1 or 2 of those guys in that freshman or redshirt freshman class need to step up, if for no other reason, because Sanders and Zipper are going to be gone after this year, and you need guys who have experience. So that's the guy I'm really looking at, is Arliss Borningham. He's the guy who had all the pub coming out of camp last year. And if he can turn into a guy who catches 22, 23, 24 balls, all of a sudden you sort of have a pressure valve for your offense where you don't always have to throw the little bubble screens out there that gain 2 or 3 yards on 1st down. You don't always have to just go, oh, it's 2nd and 11. We're going to run the ball to get into a manageable 3rd down. I got a tight end who can run out for 4 or 5 yards, catch the ball. Maybe he breaks a tackle and turns it into a 1st down, but certainly gives me 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, where we've got a better chance of success.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to say wide receiver 3. And I'm cool if it's Douglas, if it's any of the 3 freshmen coming in, Gene, Mizell, Wilson, any of those 3. I mean, even if one of the guys, I know we said young players, so that's why I didn't put Frazier's in the group and Burke and those guys. I didn't put those guys in the group. But I would like to see right now, let's leave the freshmen out of the conversation on that and just say, let's call it Caleb Douglas for now. I'd really like to see him establish himself as a strong 3rd option there behind Pearsall and Henderson. Henderson, I don't love the way we've always used Henderson. I would like to see him become more of a downfield threat. I'm not sure how much is going to change this year with that, but Pearsall certainly came on late in the season. I'd like to see that continue to develop, obviously. But if we get Pearsall, Henderson, and that third solid option in Douglas, that would really help a young guy like Boardingham come along too in the passing game. If you got three receivers, you got to worry about. Well,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Douglas was a good player last year in limited
mm-hmm.
time. He had the one catch against Eastern Washington for the touchdown when he was streaking down the field. I think that was Kitna threw it to him. But then against A&M, 3 catches for 25 yards and a touchdown, catches one in the end zone. Went for 3 for 53 against South Carolina. Then Vandy only had 1 for 10 and then 2 for 25 against Oregon State. But a guy who starts out his true freshman season 10 for 175, and you consider that that's more than Burke had, who was already there. That's more than Jaquavian Frazier's had, I believe, as well. So you've got a guy as a true freshman who stepped up and caught 10 balls and really didn't get in there until towards the end of the year. The Eastern Washington game is the first game where he actually had a catch. Then LSU and Georgia didn't have any catches in either one of those games. So you're looking at a guy who over 5 games had 10 catches. If he tripled that, but he played the entire season, right? So you play all 12 games and you average 3 catches a game instead of 2 catches a game, which is essentially what he had last year. Now you're looking at a guy who's got, 30 balls, 30, 35 catches. He averaged 17.5 yards a catch last year. So an explosive player when he caught the ball. Again, can you maintain that when you go up to 30 or 35 catches? But, in this offense, the way they got the ball out on the edge, if you used him in that Xavier Henderson role where you've got him doing that, somebody called it an orbit screen the other day where it's like go way behind the quarterback. But if you've got him in that role and you get it out there in space, can he catch, 30, 35, 40 balls? Absolutely. And that's the big thing is I didn't see Caleb Douglas drop the ball last year when they threw it in his direction. And so if they've got a sure-handed guy who, like I said, came in his freshman year, caught 10 passes, I think you can envision easily that he gets to 20. And if he ends up at 30, I think we're all going to be real happy.
Yeah, I know we're definitely thin at receiver. We're definitely thin at tight end. A couple injuries could make that a really scary position on both fronts there. But also 1 or 2 guys step up, it could become a lot better than it looks right now too. So those are actually 2 very interesting position groups to watch here develop throughout the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the offense last year was inconsistent, but actually wasn't bad. In fact, as we've been writing this preseason magazine, I always go back and look at last year. And for the second year in a row, Florida's points per game total didn't come anywhere close to matching its yards per play total. A lot of that was because of turnovers in the red zone and some other things, but a lot of it was inconsistency. And so, I think what we're going to see is that Florida will probably take a little bit of a step back in terms of yards per play. But if Graham Mertz can keep them, or whoever ends up coming in and winning that quarterback battle, can keep them more consistent, I think the points per game are going to go up. It's funny, like, I think everybody sort of saw this offseason. There were a bunch of different things that weren't necessarily great. And then you have the Rashada situation, and the recruiting hasn't been elite, definitely. And you sort of go into next season going, oh, geez, like, but I'm actually way more bullish on the team than I think other people are. I think I think the team's going to be better than most people think, and I'm interested to see what happens.
Define bullish, though. Define bullish.
Well, I mean, I'm not expecting a national championship, but if you gave me an over/under of 8 wins, I think I'm taking the over. I think they're going to. I mean, you give me 7.5, I'm definitely taking the over. I think the team's going to go 8-4 next year, maybe 9-3. Again, I don't think they're going to be fantastic, but I don't think they have to be fantastic in order to win some of the games that they weren't able to pull out last year. Are they ready to take on Georgia yet? No. But we knew they weren't going to be ready to take on Georgia until DJ Lagway was behind center anyway. So, considering the way the 2024 class has started, I'm very encouraged about the direction of the program. But you got to finish that off and you got to prove it. And so I know people look at me and look at the analysis and go, well, you're being really negative. I am most of the time. I'm pretty critical. But that's partly because I know what's necessary to win and win big. But look, Dan Mullen had very similar recruiting classes to what Napier's brought in and went 10-3 and 11-2. So the idea that, the idea that the talent on the roster is perpetually doomed to be 6-6 is, I think, a misnomer. I think Florida's going to get better, if for no other reason, because everybody's going to be rowing in the same direction, right? And I think it's pretty clear last year based on the number of guys who left and the unhappiness. You got surprise guys on the offensive line who left, both go out, Tarquin and Ethan White both go out to USC. So, clearly not everybody was rowing in the same direction, and a less talented team rowing and a less experienced team all rowing in the same direction is going to be better. That's just the way it is. So I'm encouraged about or I think people should be excited about the season. I think people should be optimistic about where they go, as long as the expectation isn't we're going to the SEC championship game. I don't think that's happening, but I think, are we going to be able to beat Kentucky? Are we going to be able to beat Vanderbilt and South Carolina and Missouri? I think those are all very winnable games, but just like every year in the last decade, if you don't show up, those are all losable games too. So we'll see where we go, but a couple of these young guys make a leap and all of a sudden things are going to look way, way brighter.
Hey, that's at least a few burning suns worth of optimism out of Will Miles for everyone there. So that's good. So hey, I 100% agree. I definitely think that this is a team that people will be more out on this year because of the end record last year, but it's a completely different ball club. So you have to look at the roster and analyze it as its own entity here. Let's move on here to $1. And we'll talk about the college football rule changes that are being kicked about right now. Ross Dellinger wrote an article, tweeted about this last week over at Sports Illustrated. Just want to go over a couple of the bullet points here. I got 4 bullet points I wanted to discuss with you, Will. One of the mentions here is banning consecutive timeouts. Second one, no longer playing out untimed downs at the end of the first or third quarter that occur because of a defensive penalty. Third, running the clock after first downs except for during the final 2 minutes of each half, running the clock, and then the fourth one here, running the clock after the ball is spotted following an incomplete pass. So all this is in an effort to speed up the game a little bit. Personally, I think I read this is going to affect maybe between 5 to 7 snaps a game. Not a huge change. I almost wonder, though, which won't ever really be considered because it affects the bottom line, but maybe the games are longer because we have to watch Nick Saban and Deion Sanders talk to a duck about 14 times every afternoon. Do you think that has anything to do with the length of the games there, Will?
I mean,
by the way, if Aflac wants to sponsor this episode, we'd be happy to lengthen this episode by another 30 seconds.
I'll quack the whole episode if Aflac wants to come sponsor us. But I think
get paid to miss work, Will.
I'm always wondering about this. Who are these people who think the games are too long? Like there are. Every once in a while, there'll be a game that bleeds over into a previous one or into the next one. And I'm like, God, like this is taking way too long. But that's usually because I'm waiting for Florida to come on. And, you know, we're watching like Wake Forest play NC State and who cares about them anyway. But I just look at it and I go, we get so few of these. And the drama, especially in the fourth quarter in college football, is enormous. And the drama is caused because when you get to say like 8 minutes, you can still have like a 21 or a 28 point comeback because the clock stops on incompletions and because the clock stops when you get first downs. And so if you take that away, you take away a lot of the drama that happens in the game. So look, you want to ban consecutive timeouts? I don't care. Icing the kicker is stupid anyway. There's no actual statistical evidence that icing the kicker does any good. And hey, you get caught without the right personnel on, you know, two times in a row. Well, that's on you. You should get gashed. You know, no untimed downs because of a penalty. I mean, okay. But if you're going to do it at the end of the half and the end of the fourth quarter, like why? It's one play. Who cares? Like just do it. Like I don't think it really makes that big a difference. But okay, if you want to get rid of a couple of plays, that's fine. The running clock is just stupid to me. That's where the drama comes from in college football. The reason you have these games where like they score 14 points in the first 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden the fourth quarter is like a 28-21 battle between the two teams, is because they have this sort of stuff and they have because they've got the clock that stops. And so taking that away, I mean, did anybody not like the TCU Michigan game where it felt like TCU had that game in the bag like 4 or 5 different times in the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden Michigan came screaming right back, and you're like, oh, there's still plenty of time, I guess, for Michigan to come back. Look, in the NFL, they're more skilled guys. And so when you don't have the clock, I mean, it's actually a challenge when the clock is moving and you don't have the ability to stop it all the time and all those sorts of things. I think in college football, it adds to the drama. I don't understand why you want to make the game shorter. I just don't. If it's a 4-hour game, It's a 4-hour game, and I've had a lot of fun talking to my buddies about it and discussing it with people that we talk to here on this show. And like that's what, like, to me, college football is a communal experience. It's not an NBA game where you go in 2 hours and 15 minutes, you've left the auditorium. Like, when I go to a game, I'm fine with it lasting 4 hours.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sitting there hanging out with my buddies. In fact, if it lasts 4 hours, I'm probably sober enough to know what's happening in the fourth quarter, as opposed to if it was a 2 hour and 45-minute game. I don't know. Might not be able to analyze it quite as closely. So I don't know, man. I don't understand the drive. It's the same thing with the renovations at the Swamp. Like, I've never walked into the place and gone, wow, I had a bad experience here. I can't believe that they don't renovate this dump. Like, that's not what I think, because that's not what it's about to me. And so, look, maybe it's because I'm not a casual fan. Right. Maybe the casual fans don't like that it's 4 hours, but the casual fans weren't watching all 4 hours anyway. So by the time they turn on the game in the fourth quarter, they're seeing the Aflac Duck for the first time. Now, you and I have seen it 47 times in the first 3 quarters, but no, I mean, obviously, if you get rid of the TV timeouts, that would do more for the length of the games and do more for the in-game experience as well, right? I mean, there's nothing worse than when the guy with the red hat comes out and holds up the clock. Like, out of all the things my son hated when I took him there, that was it, until I finally let him play video games when the guy with the red hat came out on my phone. And then he was just like, ooh, he's out again. Give me your phone. But, other than that, like,
Well,
I don't get
there's
it.
a good example of what you can focus on too, because I don't know if they're focusing on all the right things here. You could focus on the length of review, the whole review process. Why is this taking so long at times? But again, I'm really rarely ever sitting there going, how about this? How about this move? Team kicks off. You come back from commercial break after a score. Team A kicks off to Team B, and then they take another commercial break before the first offensive snap.
Mm-hmm.
Could that make up 5 to 7 plays? And again, I know that's where the money comes from. Like, I know that's where, I know it's important to have that as part of the sport. Little things like that bother me when I'm watching the games. But again, I'm not sitting there. I'm not furious with all that stuff. You can handle it. You get used to it too. But I honestly, this is off-season red meat at the end of the day. Well, this is something to talk about here in March. This is something to talk about in March when you're watching the game in October. I don't think you're going to notice stuff like this.
Well, I mean, so look, I think Major League Baseball's done a really crappy job of adjusting their rules, and now this year they're like going
they got
full
gigantic
bore.
bases now, right?
Well, they got gigantic bases and a pitch clock, and it's like, it's going to be an adjustment, right? And there are plenty of people who are probably like me, or like me in this discussion, going, back in my day, we
Right.
had, we didn't need a pitch clock. And you're like, you're right, you didn't, because back in 1965, the average Major League Baseball game was like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and now it's like 4 hours when the Yankees play the Red Sox, and
Bob
everybody's out there
getting up, just hurling like 98 pitches, and he's just working. It's not changing pitchers every 3 batters. It was different game entirely.
But I mean, again, I think that one of the things you could do is, and maybe this is what Read and Reaction needs to do, is provide entertaining things to do during the commercials, right? where all of a sudden it's like, so one of the things they've started to do for the XFL that I like is they've got all of the they got all the betting lines that are sitting down there on the actual screen next to the score. So you know what the over under is, you know what the line is. They may even, I haven't watched enough of it, they may even have like live betting stuff on there as well. So like, one of the reasons the commercial breaks are great is because you have time to get a bet in. So out of all the things that Strickland's talking about doing, better internet access, dude. Like, if everybody's in there on FanDuel or on DraftKings and they can get into their app and they can put in those live bets, well, all of a sudden the fan experience is a lot better while you're in there. I think there are little things that you can do around the edges. I just don't know that fundamentally changing the way the game is going to run, running the clock after a ball spotted following an incompletion. Like, now, in some ways, that's going to be interesting because you're not going to be able to sit there for 40 seconds and then stare over at the sidelines and have them call the play for you. Because if you do that for an entire drive, there will be 12 minutes gone. But we already don't get that many possessions. I mean, you think about last year's team, especially because the defense couldn't stop anybody. You got maybe 4 possessions a half. So you're only looking at like, 8 or 9 offensive possessions overall for the entire game. You start whittling into the time, just essentially running the clock to run the clock rather than having action. I mean, if you were going to do something, take 5 seconds off the play clock. Instead of setting it to 40, set it to 35. and then you get more action per time. And if you're running plays every 35 seconds, then when there's an incompletion, you get 5 less seconds to get that play off, right? And I think over the span of the game, I think you could do it that way. And then you haven't fundamentally changed the game. You've just made everybody sort of speed up to get the playoff. And I think that's maybe a middle ground. And let's be honest, if we're really going to have a rule change, can we get a yellow card, red card for targeting? Like out of
I
all
would
the
love that.
things,
I would
like
love
out of
that.
all the things that they could possibly do, like literally, if you get it, like you want to take away time from a game, they review every single targeting call. You get a targeting call,
Yeah.
and if it's a yellow target, they don't review it. Right? It's a 15-yard penalty. It's targeting. You stay in the game. You get a second yellow one. You've done it twice in the game. You're out. We're not reviewing that anyway. You get a red card for targeting, and we're going to review it because we want to make sure that it was really severe enough that you actually got the penalty. And now you don't have any reviews for targeting for the entire game unless it's like egregious, right? And everybody gets 2 opportunities. And so if the officials screw up 2 targeting on the same player in the same game, all right, that sucks. But I mean, how often is that really going to happen? Out of all the things they should do in college football, yellow card, red card for targeting is like top of the list. Eliminating the amount of time that's in the game everywhere else, like very, very bottom of the list for somebody like me.
First off, love that concept. Love that concept because there's almost nothing I hate more than the targeting rule in college football. I love the baseball comparison too because baseball, you're making all these different rules. At some point, when do you stop? And I understand that there's marketing people looking at numbers and maybe they're worried about how many kids are watching, even though they continue to start. Like what percentage of Major League Baseball games are going on after 8 p.m., right? Like how many, like your boy loves the Phillies, right? How many Phillies games does he get to watch a season from start to finish?
Unfortunately, he loves the Angels, so he doesn't get to see any of them.
Oh, so even better, right? Because they're starting after 10 o'clock on the East Coast most nights, right? Like, so yeah, it's like if you really cared about drawing in more kids, you could probably shift it a little bit and do some different things. But instead, you're making all these goofy rule changes for people who don't like the sport. You're changing the whole sport that people don't like to satisfy people who don't like it. Well, and at some point, it's like you said, me and you are sitting around like, who's asking for these changes to college football? Because we're fine. We're fine with it. Like, here's satisfy people who don't like it. I don't know.
Here's my other proposal. Just start the first set of games at 11:30 or 11. Like, start an hour earlier, spread them out a little bit more. And all of a sudden, you don't have the overruns and all the sort of stuff that goes on in those games. Like they've gotten long enough that the 3-hour window no longer holds them, but that's for the most part ESPN and CBS's fault. So just start the games earlier. I'm fine with that. I think
I'm pretty sure that CBS intro song is just gets a little longer every year, right?
Well, and hey, there you go. Just don't give Gary Danielson like 20 minutes before the game and after the half to talk about how good Alabama is. All right, we get it. They're pretty good. Like we understand. Like we're it's not a surprise. We don't need that coming back into the game. Just there's so many places where they could shave off a minute or two that has nothing to do with advertising. And if they were able to do that, it would make the game a better game, I think, in many ways. But changing the actual rules and these specific things that make the fourth quarters of college football games special, I just think is short-sighted. It's like a couple years ago when they were considering in baseball, like starting, and I think they actually did for the shortened season because of COVID. They started like extra innings with a dude on second. And it's like, this is ridiculous.
Hated that.
Like,
hated
this is
that.
so stupid.
Yeah.
Like, just call it like in the regular season, just make it a tie.
Yeah.
Like,
this has come from a guy who I hardly watch any baseball anymore too. I loved it as a kid. I could probably tell you more about the 1998 lineups than I can today. But it's a game that some people get it, some people don't. That's what it is with baseball, I think. And I think you got to embrace who you are a little bit. And I think like football, got to be careful about falling into the trap that baseball seems to have fallen into.
Well, I'll tell you, the trap that baseball fell in is that baseball decided to extend the length of their games, but they didn't jam any more action into that time. So it went from 3 hours to 4 hours, but you had the exact same amount of action, if not less, over that 4 hours as analytics drove things toward deeper counts and home runs and strikeouts and 3 true outcomes and all that sort of stuff, right? And all that analytics stuff is great if you're trying to build a team and you're trying to win, but for a fan trying to learn the game, you haven't packed any more action into the game. So the reason the clock, I think, this year is actually going to have a huge impact there is because what they're doing is not just shortening the game. What they're doing is ensuring that more action gets packed into a smaller amount of time. So it's not just I take my kid to the game and he's like, well, take me to go get some food. And by the time you get back, it's still the same damn at bat, right? Like you're going to miss a whole inning if you go off and do something like that. And I think that makes a difference. There was a Twitter clip going around this week. It was a Dodgers pitcher, I think last year, who was like, stepping off and throwing and faking to throw to second and, all sorts of stuff. And the time it took him to throw one pitch, a guy in spring training threw a 1-2-3 inning this year with the pitch clock, threw like 12 pitches, then a 1-2-3 inning. That's the key, right? The key to me, the reason baseball has lost favor. Yeah, you can talk about the late starts and you can talk about steroids and all those sorts of things. But I think in many respects, the reason baseball has lost fandom that it has is because they have subjected their customers to more ads and longer games without more action. So if you have running clock in the first down, except the final 2 minutes, if you have a running clock after the ball's spotted following an incompletion, you haven't added any more action to the game. All you did was shorten the length of time that your fans are actually watching it, which doesn't really do you a whole lot of good. So if you're going to make changes that pack more action in. That's why I'm like 3 seconds on the play clock. I don't care. 35 seconds, 37 seconds, whatever it is. Or if you wanted to do something where you say when the ball's spotted, you got 25 seconds after an incompletion, like punish somebody for having an incompletion. They got to run quick after they get an incompletion, like jam more action into the game. Now, look, the player safety aspect of this, though, does play in, right? I mean, college football was doing
especially
that
at the college level, right? At the college level versus the pro level. If you want to mess with that more at the pro level, a little bit different.
Well, I mean, when Chip Kelly came in and there was all sorts of talk about him ruining the game because they were running so many plays and Saban was complaining that guys on defense were getting tired and were going to get injured and all that sort of stuff.
Until he started doing it too.
Well, but that's why you're allowed. Well, yeah, but that's why you're allowed now to have defensive replacements when the offense switches.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was never a rule 10, 15 years ago. It was because of offenses going so fast and defenses not being able to match up and the defense is getting tired. Now the defense is, the other thing they could do if they wanted to speed things up is just make sure that the Ole Miss linebackers can't just fall down whenever there's a big play. And then we'd be fine too, right? Like actually, like that should be a red card targeting when you fall over, when you look over to the sideline, you see a assistant coach on the sideline going like this with his hands, and then all of a sudden the guy falls down like he got shot. And then one play later, oh look, he's back. And it's never the star linebacker who falls over. It's always the linebacker who's like the third guy in the depth chart who falls over. And it's like, between the third and fourth linebacker, not a big deal. Or it's the defensive tackle who's already completely winded. And look, I mean, we need to be sympathetic to the fact that these guys are doing something that can get them hurt. But, you see something like that, penalize that, get that out of the game. Because then you got to have the whole crew come out, pretend like the guy's hurt while he's sitting there on the ground. They go to commercial because he's hurt. They walk him over while the crowd boos because they all know he was down, or they all know he was flopping. Like, those are the things that if you really wanted to go legislate and put more action into the game, like that's the stuff you go for. So no, don't change my beloved college football unless you're going to put more action into the game. Otherwise, you're just going to be like Bud Selig and or Rob Manfred, who doesn't even like baseball but somehow is the commissioner.
Longest topic of the night about shortening the game. Interesting.
We aim to please, man.
All right. Like I said earlier, the show, more to come on the Read and Reaction magazine front. We'll let y'all know when we have clear answers. We'll let you get the final words and we'll get out of here.
We just appreciate everybody supporting us. Over at our Patreon channel, I'm doing an Ask Me Anything series of videos over there. So going to be setting those up hopefully like 2 or 3 times a week where we're just going to have videos that are exclusive to Patreon subscribers over there. So head over there, subscribe, help us out. Certainly for YouTube here, if you'd like and subscribe, that helps us too. But we really appreciate all the support. We, this started out as a labor of love and we're starting to put together some products and different things that people seem to like. So it's fun doing that. It's exciting for us to do that, but certainly the more that you all indicate that you like it, the more you're going to get.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Gator baseball versus Miami, since we're talking about baseball anyway, Will. Let's go Gators this weekend. Let's beat the Canes this weekend. It's a lot of sellout series. We got a sellout crowd coming to the ballpark this weekend. Let's beat the Canes. Go Gators.
Yeah, that stadium's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it looks great. I haven't been to a game yet there, but it looks great. Look forward to going at some point here.
Yeah,
But big
absolutely.
series this weekend for baseball. Have a great weekend, everybody, and go Gators.
Go Gators. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to Stand Up and Holler. If you're interested in more information from me and Nick, you can go over to readandreaction.com. You can like and subscribe our YouTube channel here at Read and Reaction, or you can go to patreon.com/readandreaction to support us, get extra information, and we do Ask Anythings over there every once in a while as well. So check us out. Thanks for listening.